this is Chris. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming by. I really appreciate all the great comments. Everyone that comes by on a regular basis here to my channel, I want to thank you so much for all the great comments, the very kind comments. I really appreciate everyone here. We're here to make great watercolors, and that's what we're going to do. So we're going to get right into things here. We're doing a gorgeous still life painting, and we're just going to keep it real simple. Simple colors. We're going to do some of the reds, alizarin crimson, rose madder. We're doing simple blues, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, French ultramarine blue, and then we add in some greens, just some simple using sap green with a little bit of cadmium lemon yellow. Those are the basic colors of this, and other than that, it's pretty much those are the main colors we use. So just, not that many colors in this painting. And the composition, we're going to explain exactly how to get these still life subject matter drawn with pencil, and then moving on to the painting itself. So feel free to take pictures of this, screen captures, whatever it's best to work from this when you're painting. So try to work from this finished painting when you are starting to paint. However you can do that, that's the best way to do this. And then also for the pencil drawing, if you want to use the pencil drawing portion of this video to pause on and maybe work from that too as well. So you get the pencil drawing down first, close as you can get it, best as you can get it, then you don't worry about it, and then you just get right into the painting and follow along as we go. And we create this painting step by step. We take breaks, and other than that, it's really straightforward. And we'll get right into it just in a second. We'll be right back. Okay, we're starting back up again. We just saw the finished painting, of course, and we're just going to have a fun time here, enjoy doing a little bit of work with some flowers, maybe some fruit, some vegetables. Of course, create your own ideas when you're doing some still life paintings like this. These are really fun. They're just like great ways to practice your skills, practicing mixing colors, practicing light and shadow, getting in that time of just the feel for the watercolor medium. So if you're a watercolor artist and you're just starting out, doing these like really simple, light and fun exercises and still life paintings like this are just going to improve your skills right away, because you're having some fun with it. You're just kind of getting used to the materials, your paints, your brushes, the water, all the different things you use, your methods, your techniques in watercolor. All comes down to just doing the steps over and over and over again. And then as you do that, you just get more familiar with it, you feel more comfortable with it, and then after a while it becomes second nature where you really don't think about it. It's much like driving a car. If you have, let's say, a stick shift car, or even if just taking the idea of driving a car, if you've been driving a car when you first start, you're always paying attention to everything, the signals on and off, the brakes, when to turn, checking your mirrors, all of these type of things. But then after a couple years of driving, maybe 2, 3, 4 years of driving, you become so familiar with all of those different components of driving that it just becomes second nature. You just naturally do it, and you don't necessarily have to think through the steps of doing all those things. You just kind of naturally do them because you're very familiar with it. And it's the same thing with watercolor. The more we do small compositions like this, the more you'll get used to just the overall steps and methods and techniques that we use in watercolor to get our paintings done and create beautiful, exciting watercolor paintings. So let's get into it now. So we're going to start out and we'll do our pencil drawing. So I'm just going to take an idea here of maybe a little bit less than halfway on the paper. I'm going to do my background, which would be the back of my table. So I'm going to pretend this is a table with a tablecloth, maybe a striped tablecloth. So I'll go across here. So I go across the entire page with just a very light pencil line, like so. Doesn't have to be perfectly straight. If you want to, you can use a ruler to go across, but if you just even do it by hand and it's a little bit on an angle, that's okay. That's not really going to affect anything, really. It's up to you how you want to do that. You're the artist. You can use rulers, to get more straighter edges on things or to line things up a little more. This is more of an exercise here, so we're not really going to, take the time to maybe, measure things exact or anything like that. We're just getting a nice line across our paper for the back of our table. And then we know we're going to have a table with some flowers and maybe some fruit and a few things, maybe a pencil or a paintbrush or things like that. Just some ordinary items that we might see around the studio here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'll pick my area a little bit off center and I'll put my vase. And I think I'm going to have the vase about here, and it's going to be just a clear glass vase. And I'm going to make it, I have this vase at my studio. I've drawn and painted it many times, so I'm just working from memory now. But I would suggest if you can set up your still lifes, that's better off if you can set something up on a table across from you or on some foam board. That's even better yet if you can do that. And then in the vase we're going to have some flowers, so I'm just going to create some flower shapes. We'll do some maybe simple, maybe some wildflowers. So I'm just making some simple wildflower shapes, some pink. Maybe we'll use alizarin crimson and maybe a little bit of smaller, but nothing too tremendous. We're just going to try to keep this more simple. So some wildflowers in a vase here, some stems, a few stems just for maybe make things interesting. And I think that's good. So just a little bit of flowers. And then maybe over here we can create maybe a, let's do maybe a tomato. So we'll have a tomato here. And then maybe over here, we could maybe make an orange. Or maybe an apple, maybe a green apple here. And again, just some fun still life items. We have maybe a tomato here and an apple, green apple, let's say. And yeah, that's pretty good. A couple items there. Maybe we can create a brush here, maybe a watercolor brush. So we'll put a little point on our watercolor brush and our ferrule there. And so our watercolor brush maybe we have over here. And maybe here we'll have maybe a book, maybe a study book or whatever we have here. And maybe we're going to have some maybe we'll have the front of the table here. So we'll make another line going across here for the front edge of the table, where the tablecloth will see the stripes go. So as the stripes of the water of the table, they become plumb, so they become straight. The lines become straight as the tablecloth drapes over the edge of the table here. So we have, and then over here our tablecloth is just and we're just having some fun with this. You know, it might be a good thing if possibly to use something like an eraser, not necessarily having to use a ruler all the time, but sometimes you can use things like just even a simple eraser to kind of measure out the stripes, how much space in between each stripe on your tablecloth. Let's say if you're going to do some stripes on your tablecloth here, if you choose to add some stripes to your tablecloth, you could use your own tablecloth at home. You could make it a checkered tablecloth, or stripes, or just maybe some patterned type cloth. It's up to you. You can get as creative as you want on your design of things, but we just kind of and here I'm just sort of doing a very light, and then over here's hardly going to do anything, just so I can kind of maybe add a little touch of and the same over here. I'm just going to go super light with these lines, and I'm not really going to have a lot of detail with the stripes of the tablecloth on the ends of my picture. I'm going to keep more of the detailed portions of the painting in the center area where the flowers are and the fruit. So I think that's pretty good. Maybe a couple of so this is going to be a glass vase. So I'm just going to put some stems in here like that. Some ideas of some stems in there. And we'll keep this very light, very loose. We're not going to really paint this solid. We're going to leave it glass, which would be see-through, clear, transparent. And maybe in the background here, we're going to leave this real loose, and we'll just maybe add some splashes to the background a little bit. So that's our drawing, right? Basic, vase with some wildflowers in there. We're going to make them maybe like a nice alizarin crimson, or we have some rose madder there. We can make some really light, airy, transparent looking wildflowers here with some stems. Maybe a little bit of green leaves here and there. Maybe we'll have a few green leaves that we'll have in here just to so a little bit of green leaves. And I'll just maybe for the green leaves I'll just do a little bit of hashing with my pencil to remember where they are, so that when I start painting I recall that I'm adding them in specific locations, the green leaves. Okay, so we'll add some of those. And the background, again, we're going to leave real simple. Maybe a couple of splashes and a little bit of brushwork on the background, and that'll be fine. We'll pretend it's a wall behind there, maybe a painted wall with some white paint or something like that. So we'll keep it real simple. But that's basically the drawing, and we'll get started. Maybe I'll just do my shadow here with my vase. So we'll pretend the light is coming from the very top of the picture. So we're not going to do any long shadows. We'll keep everything. Our shadows are going to be directly under our objects. We're not going to have any, let's say, early morning or late afternoon shadows, which would be very long. We're going to keep these shadows very small in size underneath the objects, which would basically give us the idea that we're having our light source coming from the top down during, let's say midday, and the light coming from almost straight overhead on top of the scene here, of the still life. Okay, so we'll take a quick break, and we'll come back and we'll start up our paintings portion of our still life here. We'll be right back. All right, so we're getting back into our painting now. We're going to start with the flower area. So I'll just tap a little bit of water on there. And this is Arch's satin paper. So it's a smooth paper today we're going to work with, and we're going to take some alizarin crimson there, maybe some rose madder, maybe a little bit of purple, and we'll do a little bit of very light flower shapes here. So I'm going to go with darker toward the bottom portion of the flower. And I'm using a number 4 travel brush, Da Vinci Maestro travel brush. And then I rinse off my brush, dry off a little bit of the water on paper towel or tissue, and then I just lighten that up as it goes upwards, like so. Maybe a little purple mixed into the red. And I'm keeping this light, the alizarin crimson and rose madder. Try to keep this light, a little darker toward the bottom of the petals of the flower. And then I rinse the brush off, dry off a little bit of water, and then try to lighten it up on the top section. And I splash a little bit, try to keep these nice and loose. I don't want to spend too much time on the flowers here, you know, just enough to get them looking good. I think the freer and quicker we do them, the better they're going to look. If we try taking 10 minutes to do one petal of the flower, I think it's not going to look as good. It'll turn out better if we leave them more loose and quickly painted. And we're going to leave lots of white paper in between all of the flowers. Notice I didn't make this sort of too many flowers in one spot. I kind of spaced the flowers with areas of white paper in between, and that'll have a good effect. Then we'll get some sap green, and we'll mix in some sap green, some cadmium lemon yellow, and maybe for a darker green we can go with a little bit of French ultramarine blue and some burnt sienna, just to maybe get a darker green here for maybe some of the darker central areas here. So I'm going to put in some small touches of the darker green, just like that. A couple spots, so we drew them with our and I rinse the brush off again. I dry off. Then I get a lighter green, like a leaf green. There's a really great color, leaf green. That's kind of like a sap green and cadmium lemon yellow mixed together. It's got a brighter. So I'm going to add some of that leaf green type color, or very light green with some cadmium lemon yellow. And we'll have some of those mixes of darks and light greens. And then maybe we'll have some more purple. Maybe we'll do a little bit of a purpley looking color. So I'll get my ultramarine violet purple. And I'll just do a couple little smaller flower shapes here. Have fun. Be free with this. Don't spend a lot of time. Just have a lot of quick suggestions of some flowers. Leave lots of space in between the maybe a few more over here for some balance to it. Maybe a few there. And there we have it. That's looking good. And we'll get. Then what we can do is take a very, very light wash, maybe add some cerulean blue. So I'll add some cerulean blue and yellow ochre maybe for a kind of a bluish gray, warm. And I'll just paint around some of these flower shapes here. And splash a little bit. A little more cerulean blue. I'll do a couple splashes of that. We'll try to just make a little bit of an interesting background on this wall here. Give it some things going on, but it's not the focal point. Obviously the flowers are here, and So we're going to continue with that, and I think that's good enough. That really looks good. We might do a little more darker lines here again. Try to do this rapidly as you go. Like, don't spend too much time on it. And you can always remember, you can always come back in and do a little more work to your flowers if you want. But if you underdo them, they're going to look, I think, better. Try it out. You're the artist. You have to try different ideas as you go. So I'm just, here I'm leaving spaces. It's a clear glass jar, so I'm going to just have fun and put a couple suggestions of stems here inside the jar. I think that's good. Maybe a little bit of blue paint, cerulean blue, just on the vase here and there. Not everywhere. I want to leave some white paper. Maybe we could do a little shadowing at the bottom of the jar there. Let's do a raw umber kind of a shadow with some blue, cerulean blue. And we'll just do a shadow like so. Maybe a little more cobalt blue, maybe a little darker shadow there. Okay, I think that looks good, and I think we can take a break. We can also add some of that right away, add some of the shadow, or add some of the striping of the tablecloth and add it right into the shadow area so it sort of blends right in. Maybe a little bit of purple with that too. Cobalt blue, so a cobalt blue shadow color for the stripe, and like that, and just bring it like that. Then maybe some French ultramarine blue, maybe a couple spots. Maybe it's a little darker over here. There's more shadow over here on this side of the table, so a little more of that French ultramarine blue on the front area of the shadow. And I think that's good. You know, we have a little bit of, we're getting some of the stripe going here, so we'll do that. A couple of them. This one we took a little more time. This one we kind of fired it in quick, right away. Just maybe a little splashing on it to give it some variation. Some darker blue, the French ultramarine blue. And don't worry, if you want to keep the colors more simple, you can do that too. If you just want to get used to the technique of getting the paint on, and in the background here it's a little cooler, so we're going to blot that up a little bit. All right, so let's take a break now. We did a lot. We did the flowers in our vase, and we just started on some of our striping on our tablecloth. So once we do this, we get a couple things going. We've worked 10-15 minutes already now, probably about 10 minutes, and then that's a perfect time to take a nice break, let things dry a little bit, and we'll come back in and we'll keep working. And again, it's a kind of a, we take some breaks, we go back in, we take a break. You can break it up if you only have half an hour to paint a day. You might work on this much here and then wait till the next day, and then we come back in the next day if we have a little more time, another half an hour or 15-20 minutes, and we pick up our tools again and we start painting in the other portion. So you can break this up in whatever time frame you like. If you have a couple hours, you can do this whole painting in a couple hours, but if you need more time, you don't have enough time to do the whole painting in one sitting, that's fine. Watercolor medium is great that way. You can work a little bit for a half an hour, 15 minutes even, and let it sit, come back a couple days later or even a week later or a month later and just pick back up again with your painting. Probably better off though, if you're going to paint one painting and you're going to break it up, I would say keep working on the same painting. So you would do this maybe, let's say on any given day of the week you do have a half an hour to paint, you would start out, do it, do this much here. Then the next week, at the same day and time, if you have some time, and you do another half an hour, and we'll show you the next bit. We'll do another 10 or 20 minutes now after we let this dry a little bit and we take a break. And I always mention too, hey, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. The button is right down there, the red button, subscribe. You hit that button and you hit notifications. You hit the little notifications bells, the bell that says all notifications. This way you're notified each time we have a new video out. You can come along with us. You can watch if you want. You can paint along with us. You can draw. Maybe you like to draw more and you'll just draw it and you don't like painting, or maybe you like painting, so you'll maybe just do a quick sketch and then do some painting, whatever it is. Just have fun with watercolors. No big deal. It doesn't have to look exactly like this. You're the artist. You can create your own fun way of creating watercolors. You can make it more wild looking and crazy looking if you want, and not get too much into the exact details of everything. You can just make it more simplistic if you want. That always looks good too. It's all depending on what level of experience you have. If you've been painting 15 years and drawing 15 years, you're going to be able to keep up with this. But if you're only 5 years drawing and painting and you haven't put in a ton of time in those 4 or 5 years, let's say, so it's just a matter of the more you practice, the more you'll be able to do more detailed work. But in the beginning, you can just have fun and splash some paint on there, have fun with it, enjoy it. And that's really the fun of watercolor. You can create the paintings any way you want to, and you can have them turn out any way you want them to look. It's fine. It's just a matter of the joy of painting. So let's have some joy. We'll take a break and we'll come right back. Okay, we're starting again. Let's get back into it here. We're gonna just clean up our palette a little bit. Let's once we start getting all those colors mixed over and over again, we want to try to keep our paints nice and pure looking. The pigment looks better if it's going to stay more pure looking, and so we just do a quick we wipe down our palette with a little bit of paper towel and a little bit of damp, a little bit of water on there, and then we're going to start again, and maybe we'll start over here. We'll do a tomato over here. So I'm going to take some cadmium red for my tomato color, and then maybe a little bit of purple for a shadow color. And again, a big part of my technique is always, rinsing the brush, tapping off a little bit of water, and then going into the palette to pick up the paint. Maybe take a little bit of paint, put it on the palette. Sometimes you can just go straight into the paint and right over to the painting. But here I'm going to try to lay out some of the colors, cadmium red and then a little bit of ultramarine violet. And then I'll go back in again and get the straight cadmium red, and we'll do our tomato color here. And I'll leave some white paper there. A little bit of a highlight and a little bit of purple, and maybe even some French ultramarine blue over here for the shadow side. And we'll just maybe go with a little raw sienna. Leave a highlight on there. A little more shadow color there. And then sometimes too you can lift up a little bit on some paint with a tissue like that. And let's move over here. We're going to do maybe let's maybe go with a green apple, olive green, then maybe some purple and French ultramarine blue for the shadow underneath. I think I'm going to change my mind here. I think I'm going to go with maybe a red apple. So I'm going to go with some alizarin crimson. Maybe it's going to be the reason I think I went and changed this to, instead of a green apple, a red apple, is because it looks good, like a balance of the three red colors. It seems to be a little better if I do it that way. And I'll add a little bit of green to that shadow, and blue and purple. And I'll darken that up, French ultramarine blue. Some raw sienna. A couple of splashes. I just want to keep things loose and fun. And I swirl around the brush a little bit with some colors, just a little bit of color back here. Some cerulean blue, some green, a couple of splashes over here. And we'll just continue with a little bit of a darker there. And we can leave that highlight there, and then a little bit of green. Okay. And I'm just trying to neaten up my apple there a little bit. That looks pretty good. And cobalt blue. And I'm just going to work that stripe down here a little bit. A little bit of purple. And I tend to try to add a few spots of color into that stripe, and you'll notice if you just touch a tiny dab of light wash of different colors into the stripe, it'll slowly soften and diffuse into the stripe of this tablecloth, and you'll notice that it'll look really good. And I'm just going to blot up a couple spots maybe, so you can experiment with sometimes using the tissue to blot out a little bit of paint if you want to get more variation. Here I'll add some some raw sienna for some warmth on the shadow side of this table. Maybe a little bit of a shadow along the top of the tablecloth here. And then I just try to follow along that idea of some shadowing there. I can go over with a lighter, just a quick wash like that with the brush all the way across, and then again diffusing a couple spots here and there of color, some red, some gold. Over here we need some blue, purple, and that looks pretty good. So then we have that bit of a nice shadow going across the front of that table, where the tablecloth has its shadow area. Like that. And again, some areas I'm not going to worry about too much. I'm going to let that. If sometimes you'll notice something doesn't always align 100%, you might say you're noticing maybe the stripes aren't in a perfect alignment or something. That's okay. As long as it's close, that's good. And again, I tend to, as we're going away from the center of the painting to the left and right, I'm letting things get a little more, things don't have to be as focused and detailed. I can just sort of splash a little bit, get some detail in, but this is more where you can kind of just go quickly with some brush strokes, and you'll notice it'll look pretty good. Like that. Just a vague bit of like that. And that's looking pretty good. Maybe we'll do another stripe here. And again, I'm always rinsing the brush off, tapping a little bit of water off, picking up some paint. And again, just dropping in a couple bits of color. And I think I'll finish the stripes here as we go across on the tablecloth, and this one here. I rinse off the brush, dry off a little bit of the water. Then maybe I dry off a little bit of the water off the brush and just continue to, then I can take some straight French ultramarine. So I rinse my brush off, dry off the water, and go straight into the French ultramarine blue with straight paint, and just add a little bit of that straight paint right there, a couple spots even there, and then add just another rinse off the brush again, tap off the water, and then just maybe activate this a little bit with some water, a little bit of water there. And that looks pretty good. And again, you can always take the tissue and kind of make a little bit of a fine edge on the tissue, and you can like lift up and make neater lines. Sometimes if you overpaint something, like if you go over an edge or a border that you've created, like with your pencil drawing, you can take that tissue and just lift up the paint a little bit like that, and then you can regain that line if you want on the stripe of the water of the tablecloth, like so. If you find something runs out, like if your watercolor wash gets a little bit, it flows out a little bit beyond the boundaries that you wanted it to, that's fine. You take that tissue quick and blot up a little bit and you're fine. And that's looking pretty good, and you might add a couple spots here and there if you want, but I think that's pretty good. I think at this point I'm going to take another break. We've been working again maybe 10-15 minutes, so let's take another break. And again, I always encourage everybody, thumbs up if you like this video. If you don't like this video, you can put a thumbs down too. If I get a lot of thumbs down, I might realize that maybe everyone doesn't like still life paintings and so forth. So always feel free to thumbs up or thumbs down. And of course, comments, leave plenty of comments. Thank you all for the great comments. Every week I get beautiful comments from everybody. I want to thank everybody for that, all the encouragement and kind words, and really helps me to stay focused and making paintings here, and enjoying the fun time we have creating new watercolors every week here on my channel. So if you subscribe, you'll see the paintings. We're just going to keep creating new paintings as we go. Every week, different subject matter as we go. And we'll have a lot of fun. And again, you just have a good time with it. Don't worry about if things are perfect. That's not what it's about. Things are just have fun with your watercolors. Keep practicing your techniques. Practice your colors. Try to keep your same palette all the time so you memorize all your colors. And then later on, you can always add a few colors to your palette if you want to later. But I find it's better to keep your same palette all the time. Same paints, same locations. These are some of the things I usually talk about on some of my other videos when I do videos on techniques and paints and what color paints I use and so forth. You can look for those videos too. If you just type in like palette, Chris Petrie, and then palette, you'll see all my palette videos. I have probably 10 or 15 palette videos, and I discuss how I set up my paints and all that good stuff. So that's another fun resource for you if you want to always do a search on how I use my palettes. You just type in my name, ChrisPetri, and then you just type in the word next to my name, palette, P-A-L-E-T-T-E, and you'll see about 10 or 15 videos on palettes if you have to get up to speed on palettes and paints and how I set up everything. And if not, you can just use what you have and enjoy that. And maybe that's a future study you'll do with palettes and paints and all that. It's just take your time learning watercolor. You'll have a fun time if you just take your time, and one step at a time is all we always think about. So let's take a quick break. I can already tell I'm fatiguing here. And we'll start up in probably another 10-15 minutes. I'll take a break and then I'll be right back. Okay, we're back from a break. It's good to take breaks, get a little bit of a rest. I was starting to become tired, so I always take breaks. Sometimes I might work 20 minutes, even a half an hour, but usually that's about my limit. Then I usually always take a break. Sometimes if I'm tired, let's say I come home from work at the end of the day and I'm working on some paintings, I might have to take breaks every 10-15 minutes because my concentration level decreases throughout the day. So just a good thing to keep in mind. If you need breaks, don't worry about it. Take your breaks as you need them. And we're going to continue here. I'm going to add a little more shadow to this vase here. Maybe add in a little bit of raw sienna, make that a little bit of a warmer tone there. Maybe a little bit of, there we go. And so I'm going to add some couple spots of color. And that's looking good. I noticed I did some color over here. Yeah, so I'm going to put in some yellow ochre and cerulean blue kind of a mix of the two, and continue with that little bit of color just to introduce something in there to make it look more interesting. Maybe there's some light on the wall, and I'm going to add some yellow ochre to make it a little bit warm. Very little though, just a little bit of swirling around with a little bit of color. Yellow ochre, cerulean blue, and I try to match it up with that little bit of color I put on before. So over here I added some color around these, the tops of these flowers. So and here we're having fun. We're getting in some, I'm going with straight paint here, and that's cobalt blue. And you can add some darks and lights as you feel here and there. I think I'm going to do the paintbrush next, so I'm going to go with, for the paintbrush, I rinse my brush off and dry off a lot of the water, mostly all the water, and go straight into the French ultramarine blue and a little bit of the burnt sienna. And that's kind of like a interesting looking dark, almost like a black. And then I'm just going to do, I'm going to do the center of the brush like this. Then I'll do the reflection, very tiny bit of line on the ferrule of the brush, the metal part of the brush there. And I'll use burnt umber for the hairs of the brush. And I like to leave a little bit of light on the hair of the brush too, the hairs of the brush there. And that's pretty good. We'll do some shadowing underneath. Let's do a little bit of cobalt blue maybe. Straight cobalt blue underneath here. Then we can change that up a little bit. Maybe a little bit of French ultramarine blue. Just to give it a little bit of change in the shadowing and a little bit of maybe warmth in there too. Then I will add a bit of orange here. A little bit of cadmium red to that too as well. And we'll do some sky color here. And maybe we'll do some reds here, some reds, some burnt sienna. Mix up all kinds of reds here. We'll just make a little. And we'll mix in some different colors. And this tends to be the shadow side. So we'll add a little bit of purple to that. It's in the shadows. There. And this is in the shadows as well, so we could add a little shadow there. And the same thing with the binding of the book. We could do a little add a little bit of color to that. So that's an interesting looking book we have. And if you think there's too much color or something, you can blot up a little bit of paint like that. We can keep that book looking a little more simple with the details on the book there, and then we just add a little bit of the shadow. For the book, we'll add some cobalt blue, purple, and a couple more details. All right, that's looking good. A little bit of yellow ochre just over here. It's always good, maybe a little bit of purple, French ultramarine blue, a little bit of purple. We could add a little bit of shadow along the back of that table, along the table. A little bit of cerulean blue. And this just sort of helps the person that's viewing the painting just to have that in their mind really, really well, that there's, you know, the back of the table here, and it's we're describing the back of the table with a little bit of color and a little bit of shadow, maybe. Not overdoing it, but just here and there, not everywhere. That's always a good thing. And then, you know, we can add in some red, maybe, just to blend in some color. Again, just tiny little spots of color. Does really look good. It blends in with the overall lighter wash of the blue and purple. And once it dries, it'll blend in a lot more. And I think that's looking really good. I think we have a finished composition here. Maybe we can we'll get a needlepoint brush. We'll use our needlepoint brush here, and we'll maybe do a few, some stems, French ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, burnt umber, French ultramarine blue, a little bit of sap green, make like a darker, kind of that darker stems and things like that. And then we'll do a few of those, just quickly, a few here and there, not too many. That'll tend to be a problem if we go with too much detail. But if you just have a few in there, just one or two or three or four, not much more than that, that looks good. And That's plenty. And then let's do our stems on our, this will be our apple. And then maybe this one's a little more green, more sap green. And we'll just do our tomato stem here. Good. Again, quick and simple. Not too much fancy maneuvers. We're just trying to get things in. I'm just going to add a little bit more of a shadow here. This is cobalt blue, just to get that little bit of shadow along the bottom of the book here. And we can go with purple with that too, some purple in there. Then even some raw sienna, just to add a little bit of warmth to the cool shadows. We could even make a little bit of a, now that that book has dried, so now that that wash on that book is dried here, that's the thing with watercolor, you'll notice it's a really, with watercolor you have to imagine keeping in the back of your mind that when things are drying, as you're painting, it's going to be to your advantage that you wait a little bit and then go back into an area. So if I tried to paint maybe like a label on the book or something like that, that wouldn't work too good because it's still wet and it would just all become diffused and blossom and bloom. So now that this area here is dry and I just touch it, it's dry on the top of the book here, then we could just add a little bit of writing on it. So maybe there's some writing on the book, like that. And that's all I did was just add a little bit of calligraphy to that, maybe over here too as well on the binding. Gives it a little more detail, but I didn't get, you know, too much where I'm starting to get bogged down in too many details on this, and then it tends to look overworked and unpleasant. So let's have fun. Everyone enjoy. Again, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Come on by, hit that subscribe button, the red button there, hit the notification bells so you can be alerted each time our new videos are coming out every week. We're doing paintings like this, still life, flowers. We incorporated this flowers with still life here. We're doing boats, seascapes, landscapes, cityscapes. We're doing figure painting, incorporating all kinds of methods and techniques in your watercolors so that we get the process really solid with our paintings. And everyone have a great time painting, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye-bye for now.